Hi there guys, this is a video that everybody's done, but I just thought I'd do something like this to kickstart the channel and see if you guys are interested in what I do. My name's Dylan and this is my ranking of the 12 Doctors in terms of which ones I like best. So I'm not going to include the War Doctor because I don't feel like we've got enough material from the War Doctor and I don't think he really counts. I know that's an argument for another day, but I just didn't want to include him in the main ranking because then you have to start including things like the Schalke Doctor and the Cushing Doctor, etc. So I'm just sticking to the main 12. Number 12, this is going to be an unpopular opinion, but I've got Jon Pertwee. Now, I've never liked Jon Pertwee. I like a lot of his stories, but I don't like him as a Doctor because I feel like he's missing one of the key elements of the Doctor's character for me, and that's humour. And it's not that his Doctor sort of dislikes humour in the way that the 12th Doctor does. It's more that he's just a kind of humourless character. And this isn't really played off in the show. It's just, I don't know, I just find a lot of his dialogue a little bit dry. And he projects this kind of elitism that makes him seem a little too human. I feel like the writers had an idea of who the Doctor was at that time, and it's not the idea I have of who the Doctor is. I think the Doctor's a really sort of down-to-earth socialist character, and to be honest, Jon Pertwee's Doctor seems like a bit of an aristocrat to me. He seems like a bit of a Tory, so that doesn't come across well. I think he's very condescending to all of his companions and everybody around him, and generally unlikable. And that kind of dates the show for me, I think. Especially as they try to do a kind of action hero thing with Pertwee's Doctor that I really don't think works, because they try and make him James Bond, and first of all, that's not who the Doctor is, and secondly, it comes across in this sort of BBC way that just doesn't really sit right. Okay, at number 11 is Colin Baker. Now, I know what you're all going to say. He wasn't serviced well by the show, and he's an excellent actor, really. But actually, you know, I dispute the quality of Baker's acting, to be perfectly frank. I think he's not that great an actor. Having seen him in a couple of other things, I just don't really rate him. I've heard he's a lot better on audio, and I've not listened to any of his audio adventures. So perhaps I should give it a go, but at the moment, from what I've seen on the television, I don't feel inclined to. So I dislike Baker for many of the same reasons that I dislike Pertwee. Obviously, he's condescending and arrogant in a way that makes him difficult to watch. This time, this is kind of played off for humour, but I just don't think it really works. I find things like when he corrects people's grammar and stuff like that, I think it's a little bit of a misunderstanding of the Doctor's cleverness. You know, I think the Doctor obviously is one of the cleverest people in the universe, but really I think he's a little bit above correcting people's grammar, and again, he's not elitist like that. I think the Doctor's a very down-to-earth character. At number 10, I've got Sylvester McCoy. I was surprised when I look back at my list, because this list is a few weeks old. I was surprised that I'd put McCoy so low, but I think really that's down to his first couple of seasons where he's a little too comic. His whole shtick just seems a little bit too cheap for me, actually. I feel like his acting matches the programme a bit, and overall throughout his tenure he seems like an actor out of his depth. Now obviously, as everyone says, it's true that does improve in his final season, and that's why he's number 10, because obviously none of the Doctors are awful, none of them are terrible, but you know, you've got to put some at the bottom. But yeah, McCoy got better as time goes on, and it would have been nice to see another season of him, really, to see where his Doctor would go, especially since McCoy himself seemed to take the role really, really seriously and dislike things like the question mark jumper, for instance. You know, it would have been nice to see another season of McCoy in his movie outfit. You know, I think the outfit actually really makes a difference in how seriously the producers take the part, and how seriously the actor takes the part. At number 9, we've got Paul McGann. Now, this is really unfair that I put him at number 9 because I've absolutely loved every second of McGann I've seen and heard. But I have only seen his 2 television stories and what I've heard, 1 audio, Storm Warning. And I loved every minute of all of that. But unfortunately, I just had to put him at number 9 because it wasn't better enough than any of the other stuff I've seen on television, unfortunately. I think that, you know, in a way, the film wasn't kind to him because he spends a lot of it with amnesia, which isn't wise really when you're trying to launch a new version of Doctor Who to render the Doctor amnesiac for most of it. Even though we get a 90-minute film, we don't really get much of McGann's Doctor in that film at all, which is a real shame, because every second of it's fantastic. One qualm I do have with McGann's Doctor, which is nothing to do with McGann himself, is why wasn't he just the War Doctor? But I guess that's just a separate video entirely, but I have some real qualms with that. Okay, number 8, I've got a Doctor who I think is actually really similar to McGann in a lot of ways, and that's Peter Davison. Obviously he had a tough act to follow with Tom Baker, and he doesn't improve upon Tom Baker, but he really does give him a run for his money. But there's really nothing special about Davison's Doctor. You know, there's nothing I hate about him, but there's nothing I especially love about Davison's Doctor, which is why he's ended up at number 8. Again, I'm going to go back to the outfit. Davison's outfit is, in my opinion, utterly abominable. You know, you can have some suspension of disbelief in believing that the Doctor wears roughly the same thing every day, but the idea that he'd wear a cricket outfit like that is absurd to me. One thing you can say about Davison is that he was the first example really of a really young Doctor, and he really showed that having a young Doctor a young actor in that old part really does work. And maybe that's the first example of the Doctor sort of hiding behind his youth and retreating into himself a little bit. But yeah, overall I really do believe Peter Davison as the Doctor, more than perhaps some of the other more varied examples of actors who played him. So for that, kudos to him. At number 7, I have the man who started it all, William Hartnell. Hartnell's a Doctor that I really despised when I was a kid, because he's an unlikable Doctor. He's rude and condescending, difficult to like, and a very different kind of character actually to really any of the following incarnations. But whereas with Pertwee and Baker, it's sold to us that we should admire the condescension and admire the arrogance, with Hartnell, his arrogance is not something to be admired, and we're asked to kind of laugh at his Doctor on occasion, I think, and side more with the companions, and I think that's where it really worked. But yeah, Hartnell offers a fantastic characterisation to the character that is different to all the following incarnations, but did lay a groundwork that I think we've got a lot to thank him for. In some ways, though, I think his Doctor has been retconned for me a little bit, because obviously at the time the producer had no idea that the show was going to last all these years and that the Doctor would have all these incarnations. So, you know, we really are seeing him as an old man that's near the end of his life, and is grumpy in his old age. But I think actually, looking at it now, we can view Hartnell's Doctor as a young man who's a little bit naive and a little bit too cocksure. But obviously that's a reading that comes from the 50 years of hindsight. Okay, so at number 6 I have Peter Capaldi, who has ended up being the lowest ranked of the 4 new series Doctors, which is a real shame because I really love Peter Capaldi, but I just couldn't put him any higher, unfortunately. Mainly because of Series 8 and his characterisation there. I feel like that sort of brutalist characterisation was forced upon him by the writers a little bit. I don't believe that the Doctor would make a joke about somebody's death immediately after it happening, for instance. I think they pushed the ruthless thing a little bit too hard with Capaldi in his first season, and I don't think he really feels comfortable playing that ruthlessness. And he really improves in Series 9 when he comes out of his shell and is a little bit more doctorly, actually. But overall, actually, across both seasons that he's done in the part, I'm not sure the writers really have an idea of who Peter Capaldi's Doctor is. You know, some episodes feel like they're written for Matt Smith, some episodes feel like they're written for Tom Baker, and actually Capaldi's performance, mainly because he's such a big fan, I think, is full of little bits of all the other Doctors, which is sometimes a great thing, but sometimes feels like, actually, come on, you know, show us who you are. And I think narratively it doesn't actually make a lot of sense, because he's the first of a new regeneration cycle, so I think it would have been nice to see somebody a little fresher at the start of a new regeneration cycle. That all said, Peter Capaldi has had fantastic moments as a Doctor, and I am excited to see him continue, and I love him in the part. I just think some of the writing has been a little bit unkind to him. At number 5 we have Patrick Troughton. Now it's very cool to say you like Patrick Troughton at the moment, but there's a reason for that, and he really was ahead of his time, I think. If you go back and watch Troughton, Matt Smith basically copied his entire performance of Patrick Troughton. There are some comparison videos out there that really highlight how much of a similarity there is there. And I think, you know, while it was Hartnell that started it all, it was Troughton that really said, you know, this is who the Doctor is, this is what he stands for, and I think that's why he's so high on the list for me. You know, in a lot of ways you could say that he invented the character of the Doctor. It's such a shame we don't have more of Patrick Troughton. You know, we've got so little of his Doctor. I mean, I say that having not seen all of the material available, but it's so good that considered that he came back on 2 occasions to reprise the role, because on both those occasions he really pulls it out of the bag. In the 2 Doctors, actually, the writing's slightly off. They don't quite get his voice right, and there's something really young about Troughton's Doctor, and something really excitable about it, and I think that's what makes him so fantastic, and they missed that a little bit in 2 Doctors. But yeah, Troughton's at number 5. Okay, number 4, we've got a Doctor who I'm actually surprised is so high on my list, and maybe if I read the list again right now, he'd be a little lower, but you know, as with all these kind of things, it changes day to day, this list, so I'm going to keep him at number 4, and that's David Tennant. Now, one of the reasons that I might have put him lower is because his Doctor is quite selfish, and that's the thing that quite a lot of people have been saying about him recently, especially when you look at his exit in The End of Time. You know, he doesn't want to let go of his incarnation, he wants to cling to it. He seems a bit gutted about having to save Wilf, even though Wilf is going to die and he'll just change into a new incarnation. His Doctor seems a little bit childish in some ways, but again, you could argue that just gives the character a different edge and a little bit more depth. Now, David Tennant is an excellent actor, you can't argue with that, and he really brought something modern to the role. You know, if Tom Baker is the iconic classic Doctor, then I think David Tennant is the iconic new series Doctor. In the way that he manages to be, like Tom Baker, both a leading man and a character actor kind of at the same time. You know, he delivers the comedy excellently, and there's a lot of comedy in the Tennant era, and he manages to get it all right, whilst being believable as this mythic figure that the Doctor never really was as much in the classic series, but David Tennant's Doctor really does pull off that mythicness. He's just an all-round good Doctor, isn't he? You know, anyone who tries to tell you he isn't is lying to themselves. He's fantastic. Okay, at number 3, I've got a Doctor who's really gone up in my ranks in recent years. Maybe I almost put this guy at number 2, but I had to hold him back at number 3, and that is Matt Smith. Now, Matt Smith is just incredible. He has an incredible breadth as the Doctor. He delivers the comedy perfectly, even though at times it would seem a little bit too broad. It's totally believable that his Doctor would be behaving like that, and yet every other moment is right as well. You know, his anger is perfect, the crying never seems too much, where at times with Tennant the crying was a little bit melodramatic. Matt Smith's crying just always seems on point and always seems appropriate for the occasion, and this is all especially brilliant considering that he was only 26 when he got the role. And this is said a lot, but you really do believe that there's an old man inside Matt Smith, and you really do believe that this is the Doctor's final incarnation, and that he has all that guilt on his shoulders and has all that experience behind his eyes. The only reason that I haven't put him in number 2 really is because he does perhaps get a little bit too frantic in the latter half of Series 7 when he's playing off Jenna Coleman. Those two are just too hyperactive for each other, and I don't think that really works. But overall, you know, Matt Smith is a force to be reckoned with. Okay, so at number 2, I've got the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Tom Baker, who, as I said previously, is just an iconic Doctor in the sense that he's that leading man, but he's that character actor at the same time. All the comedic beats are perfect. He just absolutely nails everything. He's almost the perfect Doctor, almost. And it's a shame we never got to see him do the more emotional stuff, really, because if there's one thing that the classic series is missing, it's emotional beats. You know, those emotional beats that we get in the new series that is actually one of the reasons that I prefer the new series. You know, imagine Tom Baker with some of the material that the new Doctors have been given. It'd just be unbelievable. Tom Baker completely dominates every frame he's in, and that's not a bad thing most of the time. It's only on occasion that you feel like it's become the Tom Baker show. Most of the time it feels like he's servicing the script whilst putting on an excellent performance of his own. Everything's done right, and when the show starts to waver, when it starts to look cheap later in his tenure, Baker never wavers, and Baker is always perfect. Again, unlike Pertwee and Colin Baker, he's pompous in the right way, and he sort of doesn't realise his own eccentricity. Again, unlike Colin Baker, he's the perfect kind of eccentric in that he's completely mad as a hatter, but doesn't seem aware of it, and I think that works perfectly. Okay, so the one you've all been waiting for, I mean, by process of elimination, you know who it is by now, and that is Christopher Eccleston. To me, he's my Doctor. He's the Doctor I grew up with. He's the Doctor from Manchester, which is where I'm from. He brought Doctor Who into the 21st century better than anybody else could. He did something with the part that I couldn't have even dreamed of thinking of. It was so new and so fresh, but so grounded in what the Doctor had always been. And he really nails that down-to-earth socialist thing for me, in that, you know, he's not presented as upper middle class, he's not presented as snobby, he's got a broad Mancunian accent, he's got the leather jacket, he's a straightforward guy, and I think that really works in series 1. Maybe it wouldn't have worked later, you know, maybe it wouldn't have worked if David Tennant had regenerated into Christopher Eccleston. I don't think it would. But you've got to consider the Doctors with the context of everything else around them, and with that in mind, Christopher Eccleston is pretty much perfect. Unlike David Tennant and Matt Smith, it doesn't feel like the material's being written for him. He's fitting into the gaps and putting in excellent performances where the script asks him to. Things like the Dalek scene in Dalek, the parts with Rose just before his regeneration, and actually the comedy. Now, Eccleston said in interviews that he thinks that he didn't do the comedy right. He didn't pitch the comedy right. But I would disagree with that. I think, you know, a lot of people rate Eccleston for his brooding approach and his tortured angle to the Doctor. But to me, the comedy is as much a part of why I love Chris as anything else. Eccleston's an actor who took the part incredibly seriously for the short time that was on the show, and actually left us wanting more. Maybe one of the reasons why I love Eccleston is that we didn't get a second season from him, and I'm left to imagine what that Doctor got up to the rest of the time, and I can savour every single moment that I saw of him, and I think Eccleston will always be my favourite Doctor. Maybe that's a sentimental thing for me, but then again, this is a subjective list. So thank you for watching. If there's anything you'd like me to do differently, let me know. If you think this doesn't work, let me know, and if you think it does work, then what other videos would you like to see me do in the future? Have you got any questions for me? I run a Doctor Who merchandise Twitter account, at WhoMerch, so you can follow that. I post photographs of Doctor Who merchandise from over the years. And yeah, I hope to see you again. I hope you enjoyed my ranking of the 12 Doctors. And remember, this is just my opinion, and you are entitled to your own, and I'd love to talk to you about it, but, you know, it's not the end of the world if we disagree. Thank you.